Hello, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending whether you're watching us live or you're watching a recording. My name is Tito de Moraes, and this is the third Global Stop Cyberbullying Telesummit. This is already the 5, 10, 11, 12, 13 session, I believe. We started on October 1st and will go on until October 29th, Friday. Um, as usually, I'm speaking to you from the city of Porto in northern Portugal. And so that you know a bit more about me, my name is Tito de Moraes. I'm the co-author of a book called Cyberbullying, a guide for parents and educators. This book was written by me, Sonia Seixas, and Luís Fernandes. And Sonia Seixas is my co-host this evening. Hi, Sonia.
Let me unmute. Hi, Tito. Hi, everyone. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good night. So here we are again. I'm in Portugal, in Santarém, as usual.
And welcome. And Sonia is also the co-author of this book, Planned Bullying: How to Erase Bullying from School, which she co-wrote with Luís Fernandes, who co-hosts the Portuguese sessions with me, with guests from Portugal and Brazil. After this book that is written more for teachers and school administrators, they also wrote Say No to Bullying, Don't Let Them Hurt You, a book more directed towards children and youth. And this beautiful duo became a trio when we wrote Cyberbullying, a guide for parents and educators. After that, we also wrote a chapter for a book published by the Council of Europe called Bullying Perspectives, Practice, and Insights. So, October is Bullying Prevention Month. It's also Cybersecurity Month. So we decided to put the two together and to organize the Global Stop Cyberbullying Telesummit. It's already on its third edition. We started in 2019. And we already have viewers with us. Abilio says boa noite, good night. Abilio Carvalho is a regular from that follows us regularly from Vila Nova de Gaia, which is across the river from Porto. Cyberbullying.pt, I believe it's Luís Fernandes. Good night from Beja. And Teisa Ramos Ferreira says good night, and Teisa usually follows us from Brazil, where I believe she is. Tonight we have a guest from the UK, and she'll be talking with us about her experience with an organization called Kidscape. And the title of her session is Lived Experience of Children and Families, Navigating the Digital Platforms Through Direct Work and Support. A little bit more about tonight's session. We'll be sharing lived experience of direct work Kidscapes carries out with children and families through our workshops, both online and face-to-face. And our guests will be drawing upon stories from children and families as well as schools and the challenges they each face when attempting to navigate the online world. And our guest is Carole Phillips from the UK. Good evening, Carole, and welcome. And thank you for having accepted our invitation.
Good evening, Tito. Good evening, Sonia, and good morning and afternoon to everybody who's watching. Great. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation for Kidscape to be here tonight.
Oh, happy to have you with us. António João Silva from Braga also says good night, boa noite, in Portuguese. And Carole, instead of reading your the summary that you've sent us and that we've posted in the announcement of this session, I would start by asking, can you tell us a bit about you, your background, and both professional and personal, let us know who Carole Phillips is.
Okay, well, with pleasure. I've been with Kidscape 3 years, but prior to that, I spent 24 years working in education as a designated safeguarding lead in a secondary school of children aged 11 to 18, of around about 1,000 children. And my work involved safeguarding, child protection, anti-bullying lead, pastoral, personnel designing and creating and delivering anti-bullying lessons to deliver to schools. Also worked then as a transition coordinator working with primary schools for making sure children were adjusted, ready to come up into high school. So that stood me in good stead moving into Kidscape, having an understanding how schools function. My other hat is that I'm a criminologist. My interest around that was mainly to do with offending behaviour and online exploitation and trafficking, and that's why I went into that particular area of study, which has again helped inform the work that I do. In 2014, I'm not sure if people around the world are aware of them, but in the UK we have the Churchill Fellowships, which is in memory of Winston Churchill, our Prime Minister, where they fund fellowships to research anything around the world of interest. And I decided to research the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program in the United States. And I spent nearly 6 weeks there. And I visited about 11 schools, 2 correctional facilities, a maximum security prison, because they were doing mediation and anti-bullying work within the prison, where 85% of the prisoners were gang members. So it was really interesting to see how that worked. And I covered about 4 states in that visit. So that helped inform my work when I returned to my school and enabled me then to create a new reporting anti-bullying mechanism in our school, which then we were runners-up with a police community award out of 400 schools in all of the UK. So I left that school with a good legacy when I left 3 years ago. So I think that's me.
Thank you for your introduction, and let us know a bit more about you. There's some more information on the description of this session on the social media that we are broadcasting to. We are broadcasting to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and you'll find more information on Carole there. Also, let me tell you that please feel free to ask your questions in the comment sections, and we'll bring them up to the screen. Sonia, I believe you have a question also for Carole, right?
Yes, I would like to start with one question. I know you have a presentation, but I would like to start with this question. Based on your large experience, and we already know it's a very large experience, do you consider that cyberbullying is as bad as real life bullying? Because many times there are parents who feel calmer and more secure when their children are at home in their rooms, protected from so many real dangers, when in reality I think this is an illusion. Sometimes the enemy is inside their houses on their own devices. So, for example, today we are so concerned about some new series on Netflix and online games, and that are very characterized by violence and by some trivialization or inversion of the main human values. And I wonder to what extent cyberbullying will not be able to assume a more serious dimension than in-person bullying or physical bullying or in real life bullying. So what do you think about it?
That's a really interesting question, and I think a very important one as well. I remember doing parents' evenings. We used to do dedicated subjects with parents coming into school, and we would talk about online safety for their children. And I used to say to the parents that the unsafest place your child will ever be is in their bedroom with technology. And parents could not grasp that. it's well, they're in the house, they're not out on the street, they're not drinking, they're not taking drugs. But what you're, in theory, what you're doing is you're allowing numerous people to enter your child's bedroom through the medium of technology. And I think there's a disconnect with some parents purchasing technology for their children in order to maybe feel that they have the most current and up-to-date technology, when in fact you're not really giving them something that's safe to use if you don't explain to them all the different areas of concern. For instance, you wouldn't give your child the keys to a car and say, there you go and drive the car. You'd want them to learn all about it first, and then you'd set them on their way. So I feel that parents in from both working with Kidscape, but certainly in my 24 years in education, there's a fear sometimes of learning something that's completely out of their comfort zone. And I feel that because of that, parents are not as savvy as they could be. And that's not because they're not interested. I think it's the fear of not knowing, because children know so much more than their parents. But the flip side of that is that they don't necessarily know all they need to know, because we don't give children the right tools or the education to be able to manage themselves safely online. So I think the impact of that leaves children in a very unsafe position with regards to the danger they potentially will put themselves in with who they can connect with, but also the mental health impact. And I was obviously involved with bullying back in the early 2000s, but with the advent of Facebook in 2004, within 2 or 3 years after that, I started to see a steady stream of reports from parents and children where social media platforms, which were obviously in their infancy compared to what we've got now, we've got a plethora of platforms that children can use. I remember thinking today about this tele summit tonight. I recalled thinking that in a couple of years' time, we are sitting on a potential time bomb, because we don't know the full outcome of what children are going to encounter through everything that they are faced with and exposed to online. So I think why it is different to what we'd call traditional bullying is the anonymity it affords for users who want to be that perpetrator. So I feel it definitely has a longer lasting impact. And it goes back to that old adage, doesn't it, that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And what's said online obviously can have a longer lasting impact than what physical bullying can.
Okay. Carole, one question that I was about to ask you is, what was there a trigger for you to get involved with this topic? What was your interest on getting involved with the topic of bullying and cyberbullying?
I think there was a gradual, it gradually evolved through the work I do in schools, because obviously as a child protection officer and designated safeguarding lead, you come across all issues regarding safeguarding, and very often bullying was always mixed in with a vulnerable child who presented as having issues. But when you talk to the child and the family, very often there was some element of bullying taking place. And of course, I think as a lot of adults, I was bullied as a child, and it was all to do with appearance. And I think that legacy leaves a scar, so that you then have a better understanding. And, it's not true to say that all bullies grow up to be bullies. I think we all grow up in our own way. I never had that intention to bully, but I had an empathetic outlook, if you like, on what children go through, and have sympathy to the longer lasting impact that has. So I think it gradually evolved through the roles I had in school and my own personal experience as well.
Okay. I know that you have a presentation that you have prepared to us to explain the work that you've been developing at Kidscape. I'm going to bring that presentation up. Let me just maximize it so that, oops. so that it occupies most of the screen and becomes more visible. Okay, I think that's okay. So feel free. Do you want me to move to?
Please move on, to the next slide.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that for me as well.
Don't worry.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, so Kidscape are a UK-based anti-bullying charity. We work through England and Wales, and I took up the role with Kidscape 3 years ago in Wales, which is a small country in the UK, one of the 4 nations within the UK, and the work has expanded over those 3 years because we work closely with the Welsh Government as well. So we are the longest running anti-bullying charity within the UK. It was founded in 1985, and we've worked for quite some time with children and families delivering our ZAP workshops. ZAP doesn't stand for anything in particular. It just has that wow impact, which children really love. And the question is always asked, does it stand for anything? So I think we're going to have to come up with something to please the children on that. And we run, as well with my colleague, a parent advice line where parents can, and we have had professionals also ring as well for advice around any issues they may have with their children or members of their family to do with bullying. And we often, receive concerns from parents who have a difficult relationship with schools. And we offer, to try and work collaboratively with schools, because at the end of the day, the main purpose of the advice we give is to make sure that child is safe and the bullying stops and the child can safely go back to school. So as is always the case at the start back to school term, the advice line, my colleague Kat gets very, very busy. So there's plenty of people seeking advice out there. We train professionals from all walks of life, not just from education, around our anti-bullying programs. And we always look at different policies and look at how we can research and change things. And as I say, we are currently working with the Welsh Government on several projects. And we run our Friendship Friday campaign, which is the Friday in November, which is Anti-Bullying Week, which is very successful with our younger children. So next slide, please. So we have our mission and vision, and that vision is for all children to grow up in a world free from bullying and harm, with adults who keep them safe and help them to reach their full potential, because children are very much the centre of all that we do. And our mission is to provide children, families, carers and professionals with advice, training and practical tools to prevent bullying and protect young lives, but to also offer confidence and resilience within young people as well. So the next slide. So we are funded to deliver a lot of our programs in school, but as you can see, we do offer an array of programs to organisations as well as schools, and that's all the way from basic safeguarding right the way through to advanced safeguarding and child protection, through to bullying, online safety and cyberbullying, right the way through then to our peer mentoring program. So we offer quite an array of programs with all our different expertise. We're only a small team, but we bring a wealth of knowledge to that team. The next slide, please. So the work that's pertinent to the reason why I'm here tonight is how we get that information that I'm going to share with you tonight is through our workshops and our training. So we offer our ZAP workshops, which are delivered in schools for 90-minute sessions to Key Stage 2 and 3, which is years 5, 6, 7 and 8. So from ages 10 up to the age of 13, 14. And we also offer full-day community ZAP workshops where we work both with children and our colleagues work with the parents as well. We usually run those in the half-term period when children are off school. And that's a really good way then of getting our parents on board and helping them, support them, which is often a very difficult time for them. We offer digital safety training for parents, carers and professionals. We do that. And I must add also, since the pandemic, a lot of our training was face-to-face. But I think if anything positive came out of the pandemic is it's showing us how we can all work virtually, as is the platform we're on tonight. So we've continued to deliver virtually because we have found it to be so successful, but our reach has increased So we are now back in the position where we're offering these face-to-face and virtually as well. We also offer a CPD accredited community leader training and youth community leader training, which looks at identifying what bullying is, how they can help young people, and how they can signpost onto other agencies who can support. And we started to do this in schools with sixth formers who are doing in Wales their Welsh Baccalaureate, which is a module that they do from the ages of year 9, 14 years of age upward, and this is part of their citizenship module within that. So we really want to empower young people to be those mentors for the younger children in their school as well. And the next slide. So how do we know about the lived experiences of children and young people? Well, as I mentioned on the previous slide, it's through our workshops that we do with children and families, and being in direct contact with children and families, it places us in a position where we hear the stories and the cases of concern that families have when working with schools. We have direct links with schools who encounter online issues, and very often they'll contact us directly for advice, or more often with the schools that I've established links with in Wales, they'll often ask these issues when they book a session with us, so that we can sometimes not necessarily offer a bespoke session for them, but target particular areas that they mention is of a concern to them. Again, our online ZAP workshops, we've got a lovely little community online. And again, that's only started since the beginning of the pandemic, which has afforded us a bigger platform. And I've previously mentioned as well our Kidscape parent advice line, which is open for parents as well, and professionals, as I mentioned. And if you are interested in our work, please visit our Kidscape website, which is www.kidscape.org.uk, or I can be contacted direct on carole@kidscape.org.uk. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
That's Kidscape summed up.
Thank you for taking time to prepare a presentation to give
You're
us
welcome.
an idea of your work. I took some notes here, and I would like to ask you about if you can elaborate a bit more on the Friendship Friday that takes place in November during Anti-Bullying Week. And I would like to know whether Anti-Bullying Week, who organizes Anti-Bullying Week, is something that is government organized, or who instituted Anti-Bullying Week?
Anti-Bullying Week is run by the Anti-Bullying Alliance, which Kidscape are an umbrella member of, and they are the main providers of resources. But we at Kidscape, we have a massive array of resources that we've started to put out on our platform now for schools and other organisations to access. And the Friendship Friday is a really lovely little one for the younger primary school students, younger than the ones we deliver our ZAP workshops to. And it's about obviously friendship and kindness. And what we find is that the children who we've worked with in the schools, in particular, that we've gone into and delivered ZAP, they've continued with that Friendship Friday theme after Anti-Bullying Week, because obviously it's not just for the Friday of Anti-Bullying Week. We want children to be, to be kind to each other and have a look after each other as friends every day of the week. But I remember going into a school just before the pandemic, and it happened to be during Anti-Bullying Week, and they'd made buntings of Friendship Friday logos all around the classroom. And it was really, really lovely that this school had particularly embraced that topic of friendship, but more importantly, kindness. So yeah, there's a lot going on in Anti-Bullying Week.
Okay. And is there any particular activities that you develop during Friendship Friday?
Yes, we've put all our resources on our website for schools to download, and we've had quite a lot of interest so far. And when you consider, Anti-Bullying Week isn't until November the 15th for that week. Schools in the UK will be breaking up next week for half term. And I know schools like to get all that work started, and we've already had quite a few downloads already. So we do have a wealth of information from kindness, friendship, telltaling, which children tell to do. Being a snitch, as children would call it, when they tell, that word is still bandied around, and children feel that, no, I can't tell anybody because I'd be a snitch. So we have worksheets and resources on that on our website as well.
Great. Edith Utete is with us. She was invited speaker last year. She's from Zimbabwe, and she's saying hello to Tito and Sonia and saying, Carole, I love your work.
So, thank you, Edith.
And thank you for being with us. Another note that I made here and I wanted to ask you about is one of the issues that we have and feel when we're going to schools, to assemblies and things like that, is that top-down approaches usually don't work, particularly if we're talking with older age students from 13, 14, 15 years old upwards, because they know everything. We've been teenagers, and as teenagers we know everything. Adults don't know anything about technology and topics related to that. That's their view. And I was wondering, do you also have some approaches in which you listen to children and put children to work on the topic, youth-led activities, let us say?
I absolutely agree with you. The older the child, they're still children at the end of the day. But the older the child gets, there's that disassociation with us as adults, the older generation, as they call us, that we know nothing. And it's, I think, I used to have in school children wanting to catch you out, mentioning platforms that they probably think you wouldn't know. But when they mention them, I say, oh yeah, okay, I know about that one. Tell me how it functions. How does it work? And it's like, oh, you know about that, do you? And you mention a few functionalities, or it's like, oh, okay. And I think, to answer that part of the question, I think first is, there's got to be, I think, in schools, an upskilling of staff to understand the social media platforms in which children live, because they're not going to come to you and disclose anything if they feel that you can't help them, because that's the world they live in. They don't see the difference between the real and the online world. They merge and they're both the same. So I think that's why at Kidscape we've looked at our youth community leader program, and in one school in particular in Wales we've delivered the ZAP workshops to year 7, which is teaching children how to recognise bullying, the difference between teasing, bullying and banter, and how to call it out, but not to call it out in a way that it puts you at risk or harm. And at the top end of the school, for the 6th form, we've delivered the youth community leader programs. So both ends of that school, we've got the children in year 7 who will carry through to year 8 and 9, hopefully, the information and the message we've given them. And then from the top end, you've got the older students, 17 and 18, being trained in how to recognise bullying, how to deal with it, and where to signpost. And that's our hope and our vision in Kidscape, is that we can carry this through many schools, that we can then sort of dovetail, if you like, the bottom end of the students and the top end, and work. Because I think the one group of people that can really work with younger people are the young people themselves. But it's just giving them the right tools in which to do that with.
Interesting. Another note that I made is regarding curriculum. How does your activities at Kidscape integrate with the British curriculum?
Obviously in England and Wales we have different curriculums. We are in Wales, we're going through our new Donaldson curriculum that's coming in will be in practice by 2022. A lot of schools have already started that curriculum as pioneer schools, and it's very much about citizenship and well-being. And it very much fits in, especially with the Welsh Baccalaureate, which, as I said, has a module on citizenship, and it's about working with the community. And that's where we feel the youth community programs really really speak to our young people about how we can help them change the culture of bullying, because we've got to lead from the bottom up. It's no good us as adults going in and saying, you must do this, you must do that. We've really got to change the culture of how young people behave. So it fits in with the curriculum, and I can only speak really from Wales' perspective, and being in a Welsh school for 24 years, is that it really does fit into that wellbeing element. And in Wales also, in 2017, Welsh schools received funding from the Education and Welsh Minister to support schools with primary mental health workers. And of course, what we were seeing were bullying issues that were really getting so concerning that we saw issues on the rise of self-harm, eating disorders. So the mental health practitioners attached to the schools in Wales have really been a supportive measure, and it's helping then in many ways to reduce, if you like, the number of concerns schools are normally faced with. So from a well-being perspective, it fits in really well.
Okay. Interesting. You mentioned funding, and so Kidscape is a charity, so it's a non-governmental organization. And when you go to schools, how do you work? How do you get funded in order to be able to? Do schools have to pay for you to go there? How does it work? Do you have some funding that allows you to offer that for free to schools? How does it work?
Yeah, so we are funded to deliver. For instance, in the last 2 years, we've had funding from Scottish Power, we've had funding from the Dulverton Trust, and we are currently being funded to deliver the ZAP programmes in Wales and England by the Hollyhock Foundation. And as you are aware, they only have a certain length that can take place, and we're always seeking funding to deliver our programs. So currently the situation for us in England and Wales is that we can offer schools a fully funded day of delivery, which we can offer up to 3 sessions per day. And very often that's a good number of children that we can see in any one day. And any further day that they wish for us to be at that school would be at a subsidised rate, because obviously we want to get around as many schools as possible. And if all our funding was concentrated on going back and forth to one school, we're missing out then on the other schools that we could reach as well. But we also offer, and schools, are willing to pay for our training, and we do offer training at a rate as well for them to have us in, as I mentioned on the PowerPoint earlier on. So we have a mix going on at the moment, where we have some schools that pay for our training, and we have some schools that we go into and deliver a fully funded day.
Okay. The final note that I made here is regarding one of the things that we've been discussing here in Portugal is that we usually go to schools, have a session, and then we go out, and until next year nothing happens. Until we're invited to go there again, or some other organization. So there's not something that is consistent and regular. And some studies tend to indicate that this type of approach usually is not very effective. Do you have any strategies in order to fight that tendency? Do you have some sort of program that schools are able to run throughout the year, besides you being there for a given day?
Speaking just from my experience in Wales, I think the one thing I learned when I researched the Olweus program was continuity was key. Because as you are aware, it goes from elementary school right the way up to top school. And the reason why I had to travel to the States to research that program was it doesn't exist in the UK. And what I see often is that there's a disconnect between primary and secondary schools, that when children, for instance, in many schools in Wales, we have the Kiva program created by Professor Summervelli, who I think worked with Dan Olweus. that school, I don't think has been translated into English for secondary schools. So the children who've had that module in primary schools, there's no continuity then going through into secondary schools. So all the good work and the good practice that's been done in the younger years is lost when they go into secondary school. So I really am a firm believer, and I've seen it in practice, that continuity is key. But the one exciting thing I can honestly say with the schools I've reached out to in Wales, and it also comes from, you know, my connections that I've had for 24 years in education, is the schools that I worked with 3 years ago are still coming back to us. And what they've done is embrace the work that we've done. And they then, when we leave them, they continue to take on our message about, this is not something you do just for Anti-Bullying Week, or when we come into your school. This is something that we do every day. You have to live it and breathe it for it to become a reality in your school. But also at Kidscape, we are working on the kindness campaign, which we launched our video yesterday. And it's about, and our hashtag is I Love Me. And our children have done some really lovely work in this video about the positivity of being confident and being yourself. And one child in it says, I'm weird, but I like it. And it's having that confidence to do that. So we're working with a partner, Queensway Orthodontic, in the north of England on this. So we've continually got projects going on that we keep ourselves in the public eye. Schools are on board with us as well. So we are not seeing a lapse in any of the work that we do. We're seeing a continuation. And I think working with the Welsh Government, with governors as well, who we are supporting and implementing the anti-bullying policy within the schools, we're getting a return from those professionals as well. So it's really encouraging to see that we are having a continuity of some sort in schools in Wales.
Great. Sonny, feel free to barge in if you have any questions. I still have one, which is one of the things that we are constantly. Oops, I lost my earpiece. Got it back. One of the things that we're constantly pointing out is in Portugal that we need to have an assessment of the situation in Portugal, and the
diagnosis. Yes.
diagnosis.
Yes.
Ideally, it would start by school, and if each school would have normalized assessment, that would give the school a drawing of the situation, and from there they could make a plan for the following year. And if all schools in a municipality would follow the same assessment, that would give us an assessment for the municipality. The same would go for the district, and the same would go for the country. Do you have, because otherwise we will be trying to fight a problem whose dimension is unknown, because there is a study there, another there, but there is no global picture. Do you have a global picture in Wales? Or in I don't know how politically organized Wales is, but in some regions of Wales, in some districts, counties, or something like that?
In Wales, we still have local authority. The setup is that we are local authorities, and the answer to that is no, we don't have a bigger picture of what's going on across Wales. I remember a couple of years ago with our local safeguarding board looking at doing an audit with our schools in the particular county I worked in, to ascertain what models of programs were being delivered in schools. And we got there was 13 high schools, and the feeder schools attached to that replied, and there was no continuity or not even a knowledge of what the school down the road was doing with regards to anti-bullying. And these were often the feeder schools attached to the big schools. So there was no understanding of, you know, what terminology, what language do you use? What are your children exposed to when you talk about bullying? Because as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't got that continuity of language, of programs, of strategies, you're not going to have any program that's successful. You've got to look at your baseline to see what's there to begin with, to know what you need to build on. But there certainly isn't any directory of what's going on in Wales, what's going on from authority to authority. However, I must say the work that we're doing with governors, with the Welsh Government, we've started to see pockets of excellent practice coming out of them in how local authority leads have embraced the anti-bullying policy and made it their own and really selling it to their primary schools and secondary schools. But again, you know, we've got 22 authorities across Wales. I'm only talking of a handful maybe that are evidencing good practice. So the bigger picture is it's sketchy. We don't really know what's going on. But like I say, that consistency and continuity would be key for us. Because some authorities run the Kiva programme, some don't. And some children often go across borders to travel into different schools. So they'll have been used to one practice, but it doesn't exist in the authority they're going into. So it's quite sketchy across Wales. And I would imagine for England as well.
Okay. Sonny, I don't know if you have any questions, feel free to
I
ask them.
had
And the
one.
same goes for our audience. If you have
Yeah.
any questions for Carole, feel free to ask them in the comments and I'll bring them into the screen.
Carole, I would like to ask you, what signs can we look for if we suspect our child is being cyberbullied? What signs?
Okay. We used to get asked that a lot, and it was often in school we would pick that up because we would see the difference in the child, because often we with children 5 hours a day, and it's very similar to when we talk to parents on our parent advice line or when we meet them. It's about, has there been a behaviour change in your child? For instance, have they become more withdrawn, or conversely, have they become more moody, more irritated? Are they more secretive around their technology? Do they close the laptop down when you walk into the room, or do they shut their phone off? Do they hide? Are they more secretive with their phones? Are they receiving messages from people that you've not heard them talk about before? Is there a reluctance to go out with their school friends, whereas previously they may have been very, social butterflies? A reluctance maybe to go out with you, or a reluctance to maybe want to stay in the house more. I think these signs, though, with adolescents could mean that they're growing up, and it could be the fact that they are adolescents. But I think, you really need to understand your child to know when something is not completely the norm. But they are the things that very often are what we hear from parents when we start asking these questions, like, well, actually, yes, this is happening, that's happening. So it gives them something to look out for.
And where can we seek help and learn more about cyberbullying platforms?
Okay, a lot of schools have access to what we call their school liaison officers, police officers who go into schools to deliver quite an array of topics, from sexting, from online safety, as well as the traditional ASBOs and drink and drugs and things like that. We go in and we talk and we touch upon cyberbullying as well, both in our ZAP workshops and our ZAP community. We have, oh my goodness, a wealth of sites. I mean, the Anti-Bullying Alliance, on their website, they provide details, as of course we do. We've got quite a wealth of resources on Kidscape website about all of these issues, where you can go to for help. And then, of course, you've got CEOP in the UK. I think Bullies Out as well do information on their website. There's quite a lot. And Parent Zone as well, and ParentsNet, quite a lot of online resources. And we often try to steer schools to that information, because to the layperson who doesn't know anything about what to look for, they could be overwhelmed by what they look for online. That's the problem. But of course, we do offer our digital safety workshops with professionals and parents as well too.
I would like also to ask you, Carole, if my child is a bully or a victim or a bystander, what can I do? How can I help?
okay, I find the issue with a child, maybe a parent having to come to the terms with the fact that their child is the bully, the perpetrator. It's a very difficult one for parents. And we understand that broaching a subject like that is very emotive and can cause a lot of anxiety. But we recognise that that person who's doing the bullying, the perpetrator, has their own needs as well, and that they themselves are hurting in some way that we have to unpack and look into. And we are looking around doing some work at Kidscape and how we can manage that, because I think it's a very sensitive area in which you have to broach that with a parent, because there's very much a no, it can't be my child. They're often the ones that they feel are being bullied, not the fact that they are the perpetrator. And I myself personally, in my previous role, have had to have some difficult conversations with parents when their child has been identified as being that perpetrator. And it's not an easy conversation, and it's not an easy place to be. But I think with regards to the well-being and the safeguarding of both the perpetrator and the target, those conversations need to be had, because we're never going to break the cycle if we don't have those uncomfortable conversations. And it's about supporting them in the same way that we would support targets of bullying as well. And then the bystander, we do, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We do a lot of work around the bystander, and we try to flip it and say, being a bystander, we really want you in a position of being the upstander. And it's very interesting when we've done work looking at thinking of the bullying circle, if you like, the Olweus bullying circle. When we talk to children about the different roles, the dynamics of that, I had a child, a 10-year-old child, once we did that workshop, come up to me afterwards very quietly and said, I identified myself in what we've just done as a bully. And for a 10-year-old to be honest and say that, to me, I had done my job, because I helped that child recognize their behavior was not acceptable, but they'd never really seen themselves as the bully. So we teach them, everybody is as guilty as everybody else if you stand by and watch. And children say, yeah, well, we don't want to get involved because we might be the target. We might, get hurt ourselves. And we say, well, we can understand that. So we're not asking you to intervene physically. We're asking you to know who the trusted adults are that you can go to and get help. But we always say to the children, if you are of the thinking that I'm the person that's going to stand by and do nothing, imagine if the person you saw being bullied was your brother or sister. And they very quickly then say, well, I would definitely get support and help. And I say, well, just treat everybody as your brother and sister. That treat them in the same way, that, there is, even if this is somebody you don't really like or you don't really get on with, it doesn't matter. We're all human at the end of the day, and we don't want people to stand by and watch that happen. Absolutely. So I forget the other one you mentioned. We talked about.
Basically, what was bullies, bystanders, and victims. Basically, how can also help a victim, for instance?
Yeah, we are, and I mentioned the word snitch earlier, and what the work.
And let me just add one thing, and you can add to the answer. I mentioned victim, but I saw that you prefer target.
Yes, at Kidscape we call the bully perpetrators and the victim target. Yeah. So we interchange the language according to the audience, but that's what we get used to saying that in Kidscape. But yes, we work with the children, and as we always say in Kidscape, the children who report the bullying or the child that is the target, all they want is for the bullying to stop. They don't want to make life difficult for the child that they're reporting. They just want it to stop. So we offer them the same support. And I was a restorative justice practitioner as well in school, and we used to do a lot of conflict resolution. But that can only work if both parties want it to work and if both parties are willing, because it doesn't always have its place with the perpetrator and the target in schools. And it's about educating children on how they can deal with different points of view, different mindsets with each other, and learn to accept the differences in each other. And I think that's a huge cultural shift. It's not going to happen overnight. And that's why I think the bigger audience and targets, the reach you can get in schools, the more chance we have of being successful in changing the language and changing how we look at it. But I know schools, and certainly at Kidscape as well, we offer both. If we were to get any concerns raised on the parent advice line, we would support both parents if their children were a target or if they were a perpetrator.
Okay. Sonia,
Well,
I believe you have a question to ask.
Yes, I was thinking some headlines. You leave me. Continuity is the key. The role of observers is crucial. So I was thinking what schools can do. Taking these two tips about continuity and observers, what can schools do?
I think schools need to talk more openly with each other. And I think there's always a fear with schools that if they admit to having issues with bullying in their schools, that they're somehow targeted, but they're not. And it's about understanding that it's for the well-being of your children, because it's almost deemed to be a failure of safeguarding if you don't admit to there being a problem. And it's about working collaboratively and sharing good practices. As I say, we have 22 authorities across Wales, and I can't begin to imagine that they all know what's going on in their particular authorities. So it's about sharing good practice. If something is working, shout about it from the rooftops, shout about it, support it, and pass on your good work and share it with other schools. And don't get me wrong, there are pockets of good practice in some local authorities, but it needs to be universal. It needs to be universal, I think, across England and Wales, not just in Wales, and that you speak the same language. And it doesn't cost, thousands and thousands of pounds to do this. It's about getting together and setting out what you want for your students, and then sharing that across both primary and secondary schools. And then having someone who maybe is the lead in that, from your governor all the way down to your heads of year, that has a lead to monitor and check every couple of months, check in with staff who have responsibility for that to see, are the programs working? Do regular surveys with your students. We always talk about pre-implementation baseline surveys. Have an understanding what's going on at the grassroots of your school. Look at where your hotspots could possibly be at school. Where are the areas that you are maybe not aware bullying takes place? The best people that can tell you about this are your children. Work with your children, empower your children, and get your children on board to support and create the anti-bullying program you want in your school. Because with that comes ownership, and children will invest more of themselves into programs if they themselves are fed into it. Because it is at the end of the day, it is their behavior we want to change. And it's about leading by example, but it's also leading with the children being the examples of that good behavior and practice.
Absolutely. We have a comment from Ana Maria Martorell. She's following us from Argentina. Buenas noches, Ana Maria. Thank you very much for such an interesting webinar to protect youth from digital dangers. I don't know, Sonia, if you have any additional questions. The same goes for our audience. If you have any questions for Carole, please feel free to post them in the comments section, and I'll bring them into the screen.
No.
If not, sometimes the questions come afterwards. If not, I'm going to ask you, Carole, to think about a tip, a recommendation, or a guideline that you can leave for us, for our audience, so that they can put it into practice once they leave this session. Our audience is comprised mostly of parents, educators, teachers, and people who work with children. So keep them in mind when you think about the tip that you're going to leave us. I'm going to introduce tomorrow's session, and then I'll come back to hear your final thoughts. Okay?
Yeah.
So tomorrow we'll have Samir Induja from the US. Samir is the co-director of the Cyberbullying Research Center in the US, which has a vast work on the topic of cyberbullying. I've lost count on the number of books that Samir and his colleague have written on the subject. And he'll be speaking with us about best practices in prevention and response. Samir Induja is, I would say, one of the top experts when it comes to cyberbullying. If he's not the top expert, he will be for sure among the top three. So don't miss tomorrow's session at 9:30 p.m. Lisbon time, and it's the same time in London, in the UK. And join us to hear Samir. So back to you, Carole, and to your tips, recommendations, guidelines you'd like to leave with us.
Okay. Firstly, I would say to parents, make sure that you offer open, non-judgmental communication with your child, because we can't demonize them into thinking that they've done something that's criminal, that's not nice, because that's only going to distance them from actually talking to you. The other thing I would say is explore the platforms with the child that they use. Ask them to teach you what it is they're doing online, because they are your best teachers, because they live and breathe technology every single day. And we're not asking parents or educators to become experts in that field, but at least have an understanding of what's the current trends, what's going on in that child's life. We show an interest in what it is they're doing, because I think that will then encourage open, honest communication when something does go wrong. Because the last thing we want is a child to keep that secret if they are encountering difficulties online, especially if they are being cyberbullied. Because the sooner that we can sort that out for them, the easier we can make it. And also, to not encourage children to seek revenge. It's about not responding, because I think when we respond to a message, that's exactly what the person at the other end wants that child to do. So it's about encouraging them not to respond, to save that comment and to block them and show it to parents, but also to report. And also a really big tip I would say is that make sure your child knows where to report things on all the social platforms that they inhabit, because very often they don't even know what the terms and conditions are, let alone where the safety features are. But that's one important thing, is make sure you know where to report on all the platforms that they use.
And I guess that recommendation goes for parents and teachers as well, because many times we use those platforms but don't know how to report things through the appropriate in the appropriate places, and get lost in the process. António João Silva says, great session. We still have 2 minutes to go, and I had a note here and I was escaping to ask you regarding anti-bullying week. So it's going to take place in November. Exactly when? And one challenge, and I would ask you, as an umbrella organization of the Anti-Bullying Alliance, get Portugal involved. We would love to work out on having anti-bullying week in Portugal, and we're willing to work with you for that purpose, and that way we could work together. So when does it take place?
We would love to have you on board, so that's definitely a deal. It takes place from the 15th to the 19th of November, and you will see us across all our social media platforms on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. That's Kidscape. But all the anti-bullying charities in the UK really embrace it, and I think 85%, I think that's the current statistic, of schools actually participate across the UK in Anti-Bullying Week. So the number one trending thing that will be all across Twitter that week will be anti-bullying. And the theme this year is one kind word. So we're encouraging children to promote that. So it'll be hashtag one kind word, will be all across social media platforms. So you can't miss us. I'm sure if you were in space, you'd see it all across there as well. But we would love to have you on board. So we will certainly be in touch to look at that. Definitely.
Yeah, look forward to, and I'll email you on the subject. because I saw some information and I found it really interesting, and something that I believe we can also work out in Portuguese with smaller steps, but we can always start and give bigger steps later. Carole, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Lovely to hear you speak about your experience. I don't know if Sonia has any additional questions or comments or remarks.
Just a comment. Not a question, just a comment. I would like to thank you so much for being here with us, and what a great tip that it's very important for parents not to judge. Not always we think about it, but if kids think they are going to judge them, they don't open up, they don't talk about it, they don't express their feelings. So I think that tip, it's a crucial one. Do not judge, and let them be free to speak out. Thank you so much, Carole.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for our audience. They were a bit quiet today. Usually the sessions in English are more quiet than the ones in Portuguese, and that's easy to understand because it's a foreign language. So thank you for joining us, Carole. Catherine Ames is thanking us all. Thank you, Catherine, for being here with us as well. And see you soon. Don't forget, tomorrow, 9:30 p.m., we'll be having Samir Induja as a guest. And tomorrow is Bullying Prevention Day in Portugal. And I believe also in the UK and in other countries. So it will be a nice way to celebrate it. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
And see you
Good
tomorrow.
Night. Good night, folks.